It looked to them like they were going to eat that little teeny tiny splintered, fragmented bunch of city-states up. Why not? Why think that this is the place they have to stop right before they get to all these chaotic, anarchical, fighting city-states? So that's reading backwards in history. But then he says that that this was a pretext. The second invasion was because of the help that the Athenians had given the Ionians. Remember, the Ionians revolted against Persian rule after the Persians pushed all the way to the end of Asia Minor. A few years later, Ionians revolt. The Athenians send 20 ships to help in the revolt. But the Ionians are short-sighted. They don't defend themselves well. The Persians reconquer and are very upset now, supposedly about these 20 ships and everything else. So this is for 20 ships sent to help some rebelling islands. This is a massive retaliation that Xerxes leads. Oh, that both the Persian kings leads for any irritations from the Greek states. I mean, it's silly. Now, if we turn to Aeschylus's play, we find some contrast between the characters of Darius and Xerxes. The Persians, the play by Aeschylus, is Persae is how is the name of it, Latinized probably. Persae presents the story of Xerxes' crestfallen return to Persia after his defeat at Salamis. We haven't gotten to the defeat at Salamis. We'll get there in a minute, though. Darius's ghost appears and denounces the folly which has led to the recent debacle. Darius, the older one, is dead now, is stern and dignified. In contrast, Xerxes is petulant and ineffective. At first sight, Herodotus's narrative might seem to confirm this estimate. One recalls the incident when high winds destroyed the first bridge which Xerxes had constructed over the Hellespont, whereupon Xerxes had the water whipped. But perhaps this was not mere childishness on his part. In his multinational host, in his massive army, there were many simple tribesmen who knew nothing of the enlightened Zoroastrian religion of the Persians. Thus, to restore morale, it was no doubt necessary to demonstrate that even the gods of the winds and the waves were subject to the great kings of Persia. I don't know about that. Take that if you like it. Again, we are inclined to regard Xerxes' return to Susa, his remote capital, after the disaster at Salamis, as weak and cowardly. Mardonius, his general, seems to have been left callously to his fate in Greece, but the matter may be viewed quite differently. The success of the Persian kings lay very largely in their ability to delegate power. Now, he talks about when Cyrus conquered Lydia, he left behind his general Harpagus to finish it off, and Mardonius was probably supposed to finish Greece in the same way. Now, Mardonius was Darius' son-in-law and had commanded the Persian fleet when it met with disaster on the rocks of Mount Athos, and then afterwards they dug that canal. Darius' dissatisfaction with him is clear from the subsequent expedition with which that monarch launched against Greece. Mardonius was not in command. Datis and Artaphernes were in charge of the fleet which sailed across the central Aegean to Eretria and Marathon. However, Mardonius was a man of no mean ability, and his later reinstatement proves that he enjoyed Xerxes' confidence. Fell out of favor for a bit, but now he's in charge of the Greek expedition as Xerxes returns to Persia. Now, Mardonius sets up there in northern Greece and tries to divide the Athenians, or tries to divide the Greeks through diplomacy and stuff before he decides to go ahead and attack. Quote, his chances of success in this diplomatic initiative were very good, and with a little more perseverance he might have succeeded. But, cut off from supplies by sea, he perhaps had difficulty feeding his large army, and was accordingly under pressure to reach a decision with the utmost possible speed. Now we'll rejoin that narrative a bit later, but continuing here, among the Persian king's misfortunes must be counted the brilliance and resolution of individual Greek leaders pitted against them, such as Miltiades, whose courage and judgment won the battle of Marathon. when Xerxes launched, let me skip quite a bit there, when Xerxes launched his invasion in 480 BC, Greece was again saved from Persian domination by a man of unusual character, Themistocles. So let's pause there. And we're going to go now to Zimmern, Greek history, joining on page 167. Now, here's where we're at in this narrative. The Persians have just beaten the Spartans at Thermopylae, have swarmed down into northern Greece. They are coming down Boeotia. They're heading down towards Athens. And the question is, what should everybody do? In this hour of danger, Themistocles alone kept calm and hopeful. So they're at Athens. Athens is still occupied. As for the mass of the Athenians, they could do nothing but remind one another of the terrible oracle which they had received from Delphi at the beginning of the war. Quote, "Fire, ruin, and destruction were in store for Athens." The envoys, afraid to bring home so dreadful a prophecy, had refused to leave the temple till a more favorable answer was vouchsafed to them, and at last a second message was delivered, and it ran thus. So here's the controversial message, which all three of my more scholarly works on the history of Greece did not include. The history of warfare did not include this, but this British schoolboy's book included the following. Pallas cannot prevail to soften Zeus the Olympian, though she assail him with words and ply him with counsels of wisdom. Yet will I give thee afresh an answer firm and unchanging. Conquered must lie the land where stands the fortress Cecropion, conquered the peaceful mead of sacred Kithaeron. But thenceforth Zeus, wide-gazing, permits to keep in honor of Pallas walls of wood, unshaken, to shelter thee and thy children. Wait not for horse, nor for foot that come to ruin thy country out of the mainland afar, Persia obviously, but rather yield to the foeman, turning thy back in flight, for yet shalt thou meet him in battle. O divine Salamis, how many children of women shalt thou slay at the sowing of corn or the ripening of harvest? Whatever the last part meant. Let's read just a bit further here. This was very obscure, but a little more helpful than the former answer. Run, you're going to die. Themistocles, at any rate, was ready to interpret it. He loved it, the wooden walls bit. Wooden walls were to shelter them. Well, had they not built a strong new fleet, which could carry them wherever they desired to go? Wherever the Athenians chose to abide, there was Athens. Even though they might have to abandon the sacred Acropolis with its shrines and temples, they would still have a home so long as they could worship their gods in freedom. So, we skip just a bit here, Themistocles encouraged, explained, and exhorted, till at last he persuaded the Athenians to obey the oracle and leave the city before the arrival of the Persians. An order was now issued that every Athenian citizen was to remove his wife and children to a place of safety. Ships were placed at their disposal, and a present of 8 drachmas, about 6 shillings, was given to everyone who obeyed the order. Then the great migration began. There was no time to waste, for the enemy was fast approaching. A sad sight was that embarkation down the port. Women and children hurried on board, carrying a few of their most treasured possessions. Last goodbyes to their dear homes they were giving over to pillage and flames. Cruel partings from the aged who preferred death to exile, and amidst all the pitiful whining of the poor household pets, whom they were forced to leave behind. That's silly. Okay, so we pause in Zimmern. We're okay there for now. And we're going to go to Star. All central Greece now lay open to the Persians who advanced to Athens. Since five months had passed, the campaigning year was drawing to a close. Supplies for both Greeks and Persians were growing short. The Greeks could draw comfort from their success in whittling down the enemy navy, yet, as their naval council of war met at the island of Salamis, they could see smoke spiraling up from the Acropolis of Athens, where the Persians had quickly overcome the resistance of the priests and set fire to the temple roofs. Some people thought that the wooden walls that would protect them meant that they should barricade themselves atop the Acropolis. So the priests stayed with the temples, and a contingency stayed there to defend it. All other Athenians had abandoned their